Hi everyone, I am with Emily Fitz Randolph today. I'm very excited to learn more about Transcendental Meditation, which David Lynch was a big supporter of, and they were partnering together with this institute. So I'm very excited to explore new revenue. We were talking about how Transcendental Meditation can actually contribute to our health and overall world peace and many more, but I'll let Emily. Please introduce yourself, institute, your connection to David Lynch, and how does your organization contribute to well-being of people and the world?
Wonderful. Well, I'm so happy to be with you, Bessy. My name is Emily Fitz Randolph, and I'm the co-director of the TM program in Los Angeles. We operate very closely with the David Lynch Foundation, and that foundation supports teaching TM to underserved populations. In LA, we've been teaching hundreds, thousands of people currently right now who've been displaced by the wildfires, and I can talk more about that later. David Lynch, as you mentioned, huge proponent of TM. He learned TM in the 60s or 70s, and he's been, he practiced for 40 plus years, never missed a day of meditation, and he really attributed all his success and creativity to that practice. And his dream was for everyone to learn TM. And so we here at the David Lynch Foundation and the LATM program really work to bring that peace, inner peace, to everyone.
Beautiful. How did your journey start and you end up here?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. My parents were influenced to learn TM by the Beatles in the 60s. Maharishi, who's the founder of TM, brought this technique to the West in the 1950s, and he taught the Beatles very famously in the 60s. And so in the 70s, my parents learned TM. So I grew up meditating. I learned this technique at 10 years old, and I meditated all through my childhood. I became a teacher about 6 years ago, and now I live in LA and teach, full time, which is wonderful. So for me, this technique is incredible. I learned very young, and then I had a period of time not meditating. And in that time, I really experienced the world and how easy it is to get burnout and overwhelmed. And I remember thinking at one point, I wish there was some easy, natural way I could deal with the stress that I'm feeling and this sort of disconnect from myself. And I got back into my TM practice, and it was so transformational. That's really what inspired me to become a teacher.
Wonderful, wonderful. And as basics, like how would you introduce transcendental meditation for a beginner level people who want to learn about?
So it's a great question, and I think we get this question a lot. What is transcendental meditation? How does it differ from other techniques? So very simply, transcendental meditation, or TM, is a very effortless practice, meaning during the technique, we don't have to worry about trying to clear the mind of thoughts. We're not focusing, we're not concentrating. A lot of meditations have this idea that we have to clear the mind of thoughts, right? We kind of envision maybe the guy on the mountaintop, no thoughts in his head, and we think that's a meditator. But in fact, what this technique shows us is that through no effort, through just practicing this very simple technique, the mind settles down. So let me give you a quick analogy. We use this analogy of the ocean, and David Lynch also very famously has beautiful ways he describes this. But think of an ocean, busy and active, right? All those waves at the surface. If you were to dive to the depth of the ocean, it's quiet, it's calm, it's naturally still. Our mind has that same structure. We experience life up here, right? And when we get overwhelmed by the world around us, that's sort of that overshadowing experience of being tossed around by the waves. But we also, at all times, have this deep inner peace, this inner silence, and it never leaves us. It's always there. We're just blocked from it. We're not accessing it, at least not regularly. So what TM does is it provides a vehicle for the mind to settle down naturally. And what we experience is that inner peace, that unbounded state of inner restfulness, that source of all that activity and creativity and inspiration is right there. It's never left us. When we start experiencing that, then we come back out into our life and we feel more fulfilled.
You're on a small boat, you're in the middle of the ocean, out in the middle of the ocean, and all of a sudden you get these huge swells, these huge 40, 60-foot high waves, and you could think, oh my God, the whole ocean is in upheaval. Well, not really, because if you do a cross-section of the ocean, You see these little 40-foot high waves, and the ocean is like, in reality, a mile deep. And the ocean is active on the surface, but at the depth of the ocean, it is naturally silent. That's the nature of the ocean. Active on the surface, silent at its depth. And the analogy is our mind. The surface of our mind is the active thinking mind. All the things that we're thinking about all during the day. It's like the waves on the surface of the ocean. And I like to call it the gotta mind. I gotta do this, and I gotta do that, and I gotta call him, and I gotta call her, and I gotta make a list, and I gotta find the list, and I gotta make a new list, and I gotta get going, and I gotta slow down, and I gotta get to sleep, and I gotta wake up. I'm sure everybody's had a gotta mind at some point. And there's a natural inclination, a natural desire to have some inner calm, some inner clarity, some inner focus, some inner inspiration, some inner peace, some inner happiness. Natural. And the operative word there is inner. And the question is, where is that inner, and how do we get there?
And then we go out and we live our lives, and we find that our life becomes more fulfilling. We're thinking more clearly. Our mind is more creative. And it's not just an anecdotal experience. We have a lot of research on TM, which I can talk about at more length, but we've looked at what happens when we practice this technique in regards to our mind, our body, and not just us, right? But the world as a whole. How does one person meditating affect society? So it's a brilliant technique, and I can talk more about it in detail.
Wonderful. That was a great introduction. And I personally think anger is a big problem. Anger, depression, anxiety, those kind of negative emotions we deal with.
Yes.
And we do it even to our loved ones.
Yes.
Like, I love my mom, but she keeps yelling at me with my partner. We have difficulties, we have anxieties, this and that. And David Lynch also said himself, when we have those kind of negative emotions, we can't really create, produce, and be active. So
that's right.
I would love. Where would people look at for get more information?
Yes, and I'll just address that point that you mentioned really quickly, because I think that's absolutely right. We feel these emotions, and they're natural and they're human. Anger, dissatisfaction. Really, what's happening is that our nervous system is having a response or a reaction to the world around us. We know when we feel better, we feel calmer, something can happen, and we aren't as triggered. We aren't going to have that fiery emotion. We might have that ability to pause and respond instead of just reacting, right? So what TM does is, it's not a lifestyle program. We don't have to think about being nicer outside of meditation. We simply do this practice, and the mind and body settle down so deeply that the whole sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response, which creates that sort of negative emotion tendency, downregulates. And instead of that cortisol and adrenaline flooding our system, now we get this upregulation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So naturally, we're flooded with serotonin and dopamine. And we find that now in our interactions with people, we feel more loving, we feel more kind, we see more perspectives. David Lynch so beautifully talks about that those negative emotions get in the way. They not only get in the way of creativity, but they get in the way of us being ourselves. Right? I'm sure we could all say that when we're in that state where we're having those fiery emotions, we kind of feel overshadowed by them. We kind of lose ourself in that moment. Our self is complex, but we're able to access that self more. So, if anyone is interested in learning TM, the best place to go is tm.org, where you can find out more. You can learn about a teacher near you. TM is always taught in person. So it's a very systematic technique. We teach over 4 consecutive days for about an hour each day to really learn this technique. And then once you've learned, you don't need a teacher. You don't need to be in a particular environment. You can practice this on your own anywhere. That's what makes it so accessible, right?
Wonderful. I mean, what you said, that metaphor says it also. We do have that peace in us, like under that wavy ocean. We just got to find that peace. Go and check out tm.org. I personally am very interested. I'll probably get some classes. My second question. So in this episode, I'm slowly getting to the book where I got everything started. It's called Oneness. And this book talks about some similar principles universally has been found in all different world religions. And it's very interesting in mythology. Like when you look at Greek mythology and Roman mythology, they almost have the same gods and goddesses and the same stories with different names. How did this happen? They didn't have internet, they didn't have television. So I do believe some sort of cosmic consciousness, and same thing goes for religions.
Yes.
And I'm going to start going over that book. The first chapter is Golden Rule. What is the Golden Rule? Treat others as you'd like to be treated. Like it said that Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and it goes on. I don't remember all the other religions they mentioned. These are the top ones that comes to my mind, but top popular ones. I don't underestimate any religion, but so basically from a transcendental meditation point of view and your personal philosophy, what do you think about that? The golden rules?
Yeah.
How can we apply more of golden rule to ourselves and to others?
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful point, and I absolutely agree that we have all of these different methods, religions, philosophies, techniques, right? And they sort of come at different angles and use different language. TM is a technique, meaning we don't have a philosophy or belief system that we subscribe to, but we do have an understanding that how we are, right, is how we show up in the world, meaning the world is as we are. Treat others as you want to be treated. Well, the first step is making sure that your nervous system is settled and stable, that you are, again, coming from a place of response versus reactivity. And the first step to that is not to sort of imagine how we'd want it to be, although that's important, but to actually address part of the problem, which is the mind and body that we're sitting within, right? Because we can't experience the world or ourself fully, normally, and in a balanced way until our own system is regulated. So Maharishi, who's the founder of TM, spoke very beautifully on these principles. The world is as we are, that we as an individual are responsible for taking care of ourselves. And only then will we be able to really bring that peace out into the world. So the way we think about it is, if we're taking care of ourselves, we're making sure that we are accessing that fundamental level of peace within, then it's only natural that that will spill out into the world around us. It's almost like there's a separation sometimes if we're trying to be in a place where we're acting or giving or showing love. Why don't we just create a physiology that is love, so that naturally that peace and that love is emanated by who we are and how we interact with others?
Beautifully said. And it's very difficult sometimes. I don't want to be yelled at, but I do yell sometimes. I don't want to lie to people. I don't want to do a lot of things, but I end up doing it. And
yes,
it's karma. Do you believe in karma?
Absolutely. Yes. So I think, we hold within us this certain mix of karma that we come with, right? We have a lot of stories and things that kind of interact on our physiology. Again, it can be genetic. It can be things that we've brought to the world from our own ancestry line. Ultimately, we can dissolve that karma very quickly through our actions. And you're right, we know we don't want to act this way, and yet we do it. We know we don't want to be this way, but we do it. So what is stopping us? It's simply some disconnect between our actual self, that deep, unbounded, higher self, we could say, and the sort of personality self that we show to the world. They're both very important, but if we think that that smaller self is all we are, then we're losing the big picture. And just to put one more analogy here, let's go back to that ocean, right? So if we live our life just on the surface, we're going to be tossed around by all the things in our life. But if we're actually experiencing the full scope of ourself, meaning we're acting from that deep unboundedness, then we'll have the full scope of our personality, and naturally we'll be aligned, we'll be acting more in line with natural law, with support of nature.
And I think treating others as we'd like to be treated would start with less fights in our personal lives, less problems in our personal life, and then larger scale, I think it's the key to peace.
100%. Yeah, and it's those personal relationships, right? We can have big ambitions and dreams for how we want the world to change, which we do. We want world peace. I don't think anyone could say, if they really ask themselves, no, the world's fine. We know that there's some issues with what's happening in the world and wars and fighting and tension, but it starts with ourselves, right? It starts with ourselves. It starts with our ability to interact with love, with kindness in our own life. And also, more importantly, and I think sometimes overlooked, is that relationship with ourselves. You know, what are we saying to ourselves on a daily basis? Are we saying negative things to ourselves? Are we kind and loving to ourselves? You know, we want to be successful and creative, but are we pushing and scolding ourselves to get there? Or are we nurturing ourselves? And that self-relationship, I think, is where this all begins.
Yes, self-love and self-peace. And if you want to be treated with love and peace, start doing so. Searching for Goodness brought us to you. And I want to ask, what's your opinion on goodness? What do you think goodness is, and how do you and your organization contribute to goodness? Here, you know, we had an episode with firefighters, the firefighter Captain Eric Scott. He was great. And I saw that your organization doing scholarships for firefighters. I want you to talk about that and any other thing you can add on as goodness and serving for goodness.
Beautiful. Well, I love this question, and I love the theme of this podcast, because that is our mission, is to bring goodness, is to bring peace and fulfillment to everyone. We want everyone to be internally happy and fulfilled. And right now, we live in LA and we've been affected. I think everyone in LA, everyone in the city has been affected to some extent by these very devastating fires that have happened, and some, of course, more than others. And so one thing that we're doing, which we're very excited about, and which David Lynch was a big proponent of, was to bring TM for free to any first responder, firefighter, or anyone displaced by the fires. And so we have an application process. It's very simple. We just want to know, what is your situation? And then we're teaching people, and we are planning to teach, you know, hundreds, thousands of people. Right now, we're also fundraising to make sure that we can get support to be able to teach everybody. But it's very close to our heart. It's the most important thing that we can be doing. So if anyone is interested in applying, if you know of anyone who was displaced, or any first responders of any kind, you can visit meditate-la.org. There's a simple application, and we talk more about the TM technique. You know, again, this technique is so profound at helping with trauma. We teach a lot of veterans, for example, with PTSD, and others with PTSD. And people who've been learning recently from this program have said, it's the one thing I can hold on to. I have not felt this relaxed or this at peace or at ease in myself since I learned. One woman who lost her home in Altadena, she woke up the next morning and she said, I had nothing except for my TM. And I sat down and I was reminded that I'm okay.
You show up and you got a building that's on fire, you know, single family dwelling, 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, people are sleeping. You got the guys going to the roof to open it up. And then sometimes there's people in the building that were not able to get out in time, and they die. Throughout my career, I mean, I was multiple big brush fires. They are getting bigger, they are getting more stressful, and when you do go, you're gonna be gone for, you know, possibly weeks at a time. I was a firefighter for 34 years. There's a lot of things that I've seen that I can't unsee.
We see one incident in our lifetime, they see over 200, 300 incidents during their career.
We try to pretend that stuff doesn't bother us, but those type of things do bother you. And when your buddy asks you, hey, how are you doing? Everybody says, we're good, I'm good.
They start suffering in silence, and it's not okay to say, I'm not okay. It's really not accepted, because they start thinking, well, are my teammates going to think that I'm not going to save them from a fire?
Firefighters, police officers, military people, we've got the highest suicide rates in the United States.
When a firefighter is struggling, who do they call? They are 911. Who do they call? When I heard from your organization, I thought, oh my gosh, TM, this is what the firefighters need. This is something that's going to help their amygdala, their brain, quiet down.
My experience has been nothing but positive. When I meditate, things are a lot better.
Right now, 1 out of 3 firefighters, they're suffering with some kind of mental illness. I know if every firefighter was trained in this, we'd see a huge difference in their mental health problems.
I think if they're introduced to it from the time they're in the drill tower, just like they're introduced to so many other things, it could be something that can help them right from the get-go.
That will prevent so many firefighters from leaving early, from retiring early, from having mental health breakouts.
And we can't underestimate the importance of feeling that security in ourself. You know, I think as it relates to goodness, when we are feeling unstable or insecure, and that's a very real reality when we lose our home or we don't feel safe in our environment anymore, you know, what can we look at? What can we look to hang on to? And really, it's that self, it's that deeper, grounded inner peace that we have right there. It never leaves us. It's never going anywhere. We just need to access it. And what's really beautiful about the TM technique is when we access it, it's not just during meditation. We're not just doing a meditation so that we get relief and then we're out in the craziness of life. What we start to experience is that goodness, that deep peace, that reassurance and resilience starts to come out into our activity. That's why we do it. It's a technique for action.
Very nice. Very nice. Amazing, actually. It's amazing that you're doing this. So you heard that. What's that website again?
meditate-la.org. And if you want to also visit tm.org, you can find more information. Okay. I'll also include my information if anyone wants to reach out to me directly.
That would be great. You can put it right there.
Perfect.
And I think I've seen it. I go to YMCA. I think they had the little flyers. I've seen it there. So that's really amazing that you are truly doing goodness with this organization.
You have to be a warrior for goodness, a warrior. Yeah, you have to be a warrior for goodness.
I want to ask about your thoughts on science and spirituality and environmental issues. What do you think we can do? And yes, we talk about peace, but being peace to me doesn't just being passive. Like, we got to be active. We got to be warriors of goodness, fight the bad sides within ourselves, fighting against bad urges, bad habits, and fight about all the bad things we see in the world, making a statement about it. That's what I think. So what do you think we can do?
Beautiful question. Yeah. Well, I'll say first, just to start, that this sort of science and spirituality, I think people think of them on these polar, opposite sides, but the sort of deeper we're getting into science and quantum physics, I think we see more that these are sort of two sides of the same coin. In TM, we use a lot of quantum physics language when we talk about TM, because back to that ocean analogy I mentioned, that deep inner peace that we talk about, quantum physicists who've practiced TM and understand quantum physics have seen that the mind has the same structure as this unified field. The unified field is this field of all the laws of nature and creative intelligence. If you break everything in matter down into its finest building blocks, and you're down to the level of quarks and leptons, protons, neutrons, everything can be unified into this unified field. It's known as string theory or M theory. And that unified field is the basis for everything. So when we think about what's happening in the world and how can we, fight the good fight and be warriors for goodness, the most fundamental thing we can do is establish our own physiology in that field. Because then naturally, once we're activated in that field, we will be acting from a place of goodness. And I'll just mention some really interesting work that's done in this area. There's a lot of research on TM, hundreds of scientific research studies. TM at this stage, I think, is the most heavily scientifically researched technique there is. A lot of meditations now have research, but in TM, we've been publishing peer-reviewed studies on this technique. And there's a lot of research on TM practiced by groups and how that influences society as a whole. So when people practice TM in large groups, there's an influence on things that you can measure, on the crime rate, on violent tendencies, on hospitalization visits. They've done these big studies where they'll have thousands of people meditating at the same time, and they'll watch the crime rate and how it will go down as more coherence is created from these groups of meditators. So from that perspective, starting with the individual, meditating, and meditating in groups has a huge influence. And then in terms of the environment, right? How can we address these issues that are very real, like climate change and these crises that we see that are really probably going to affect future generations if we don't get a handle on it?
Right.
Again, we just have to start with really opening up our awareness. I think that one of the most fundamental things we can do is create environments within our own physiology that expand our problem-solving ability. If we look right now at climate change, for example, and we say, wow, this is serious, let's do these little things. And then sometimes it seems overwhelming. Like, how can my, not using a paper straw help the, plastic straw? But we start to expand our own conscious capacity, which enables us to see more solutions in this world that's full of problems right now. And so TM, a meditation technique that allows our mind to become fully coherent, actually expands our ability to problem solve. So it's so critical that we're not just focused on ourselves, but we're doing everything we can for others. But it truly starts with the individual, right? We get the benefits, and that energy or coherence resonates out more broadly.
That's a very good answer. Yes. I mean, not just by meditating, but to get to the right kind of state to find solutions to problems.
That's
and
right.
Little things add up. But, we do recycling at home. Those little things, little, do add up together. I do agree on that. And what do you think? You said science and spirituality when you look quantum physics. I heard that before too. Energy has a lot to do with quantum physics. What do you think when Einstein said E equals to energy? What do you think about that? What Einstein meant?
So, I think Einstein was really looking for that unification principle. And a lot of physicists have been working towards this unification, right? At this stage, we are not able to concretely say that gravity, electromagnetism can be unified by a unified field, but that's what he was looking for this evidence that, everything that we're experiencing right now is the result of energy developing into matter and into experience.
Right.
And so when Einstein was looking at how can I unify this, how can we get to the basis, that's really where quantum physics comes in and is able to address these issues, right? We can look at the finest level of matter. I think it's the Planck scale. When we get beyond that, that's when we start seeing this energy, this pure creative intelligence that's at the basis of everything, right? Again, David Lynch brilliantly talks about diving into that unbounded ocean, that field that's there. It's always there. What starts to happen through meditation, through these kinds of things, is we wake up to the reality that that's always there. We suddenly become more awake in ourselves and the world around us. That's, again, what gives us that ability to problem solve.
Right. When you said that, I imagined somebody like diving in underwater and grabbing a rock. Like that came to my mind. I mean, it's just maybe he meant like, will our minds and energies have power over matter? Can we like Jedis or like what fictional things we see? But in a way, I was always an imaginative kid, and my parents would be like, "Oh, you're always in an imagination land. Like you're not realistic." They used to say, "I'm much more realistic than I used to be." But I would always tell them a plane was a dream. A phone was a dream. These cameras was a dream. Like it all starts with imagination and a dream, and then people materialize it. So everything we're talking here might sound like, oh, they're like Beatles, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? Imagine all the people. But it starts with imagination. We can create that world. And they said utopia is impossible.
That's right.
That make us believe utopia not possible, dystopia possible. But I think changing it, we can make utopia possible by changing the system.
That's right. I completely agree. I think that this kind of discussion to some people can sound very lofty, very idealistic, and very unattainable. But the reality is that what we're actually saying is the most practical thing. It's simply, we've seen throughout history that when human beings have had limited perspectives, we've been lost in certain ideas,
Right.
oh, the sun is traveling around the earth, or these different ways that we thought that's the way it is until we learn something new and our perspective changes. Even science has been shown to be disproven time and time again as we learn and as we grow. We place such an emphasis on scientific evidence-based, and it's critical. We need to have that. We can't live outside of that bounds. But I think, again, our perspective on that is limited. There's a wonderful theory by Dr. Tony Nader, who is the head of the TM organization. He's a physicist and a doctor, and he proposes, and this is also based on Maharishi's thinking, that consciousness is all there is, that it's not a brain creating consciousness, but in fact, this matter that we experience as our body is simply consciousness, that everything is consciousness. And so it's the level and capacity to understand consciousness fully that enables us to be complete and whole in this world and get to that place where goodness and peace is a reality.
Beautifully said. Thank you. On that note, I believe goodness will win eventually, although goodness seems to be less than evil when we take a look at our world right now. So, any other last words you want to add before we go?
It's just been such a pleasure. And, I hope these conversations feel inspiring to people. It's always inspiring to talk about this kind of thing. And I think, what you're doing and what this message is really to help everyone. We're not islands unto ourselves, and we get to be in relationship and connection with each other. And so taking care of ourselves and then doing good for the world is, in my mind, the most important thing we can do on this earth.
I agree. And what did you say, Maharishi? He said something about the crime rates going down or worse stuff.
Yes,
with the
so
meditation.
I'll mention one study that just illustrates this. I think it was in 1993. They took a group of 2,000 meditators, TM meditators, and they went to Washington, D.C.
I heard about that.
Did you hear this?
Yeah.
And it's great. They chose Washington, D.C. because every year in the summer, the crime rate would accelerate. And it was just something that was proven, it was irrefutable, it was on record. So they brought this group of meditators in. And over 2 months, these people simply meditated. They didn't protest, they didn't go out and do anything else, they just meditated. And this group that was watching said, okay, we want all the, chief of police and research institutions to observe what's happening. And what they saw was, as this group meditated and this coherence, this collective consciousness was created through meditation, the crime rate went down significantly. And because it was a study, at the end of the 2 months, the group left, crime rate went right back up.
Wow.
And the chief of police at the time said, we can't explain it. The only thing that would have caused this huge drop is, snow in July. But, these studies were done in many other cases. They went to the Middle East and war-torn areas, and they would bring people in to practice TM, and war crimes would go down, deaths would go down. So, these sound, again, like sort of wild studies, but this field effect that's being employed, it's simply this physics field effect where when we meditate and our own consciousness is at that foundational level, there's an influence more broadly. And it's also known as the Maharishi effect, because Maharishi put together these big groups. And his focus was really on world peace. He wanted to promote this meditation not as something elite for people who have time to meditate. It's not for those people that want to go to the ashram and meditate all day. There's nothing wrong with that. But you and I, we're busy, active people. We have lives, we're living, we're doing successful things we want to create and produce. And so this is a technique to help us be more productive and successful.
Wonderful. That's, okay. So this might be a key to world peace as we hear it. So I would definitely look more into it. All right, everyone. It was a pleasure to have Emily today. Thank you so much. And let's say it together one time to this camera.
All right.
We say, goodness will win. 3, 2, 1.
Goodness will win.
Please subscribe and share and like and do all that. Okay. And cut.
Goodness, goodness, goodness. Goodness will win. Yes, Lord. Goodness will win.